I wish that I could swim and sleep like a shark does. I'd fall to the bottom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Comprehensible Input podcast, where we have interesting conversations with interesting people about interesting topics in English that we can all understand. Today, we're talking about Britain in the 90s, and our very special guest is Aidan. Aidan, hello.
Hello.
First of all, can you just give us a bit of background about yourself? Can you tell us something about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Aidan. I am now 45 years old. I was born in Chatham, which is a place in the southeast of England. I have a family. I have two sons and a wife. I currently live in Shanghai, China, and I am an English teacher.
As I understand, you've lived and you've traveled in quite a few places, right? I think you've been you've lived a bit in Cyprus. If I remember correctly, you've traveled around Afghanistan?
Well, I've been to a few countries in my time. Yeah, many different countries in Europe. But one particular journey I took when I was, how old was I? 26. I met an ex-girlfriend of mine at Glastonbury, the Glastonbury Festival in England, big music event. And I met this girl, and we decided that we liked each other, and that we would leave our jobs and go to university, because both of us did not go to university after school. We decided not to do that, and we worked. So yeah, we decided we would go to university, but before then, go traveling around Asia. So we did that, and we flew to. We went to Thailand, and then from Thailand we traveled from Thailand down to Malaysia, and then from Malaysia we flew to Cambodia, and then from Cambodia went back to Thailand, and then when we were on the beach in Thailand, we decided that we would try to get to India, but no flying involved, just by land. So we traveled up north of Thailand into a country called Laos, and then from Laos we traveled into China, and then from China we went to Tibet. And when we were in Tibet, we needed to go into Nepal, because Nepal is just in between Tibet and India. However, we could not do that because there was some revolution in Kathmandu. So we actually, in fact, had to fly back to Beijing in China in order to extend our visas. And then we got a train across China to a place called Urumqi in northwest China. And then we went overland down through Pakistan, and then into India. So we were very near to Afghanistan, but not quite there. Yeah.
I don't know why I thought you'd been to Afghanistan. But anyway, sounds like an amazing journey. And there are quite a few topics that I could have spoken to you about. But the one that I settled on was Britain in the 90s. For me, a very nostalgic period, and I guess for you too. The first thing I want to ask you is just about any association. So if I mention like Britain in the 1990s, what are some things that come to mind immediately?
Yeah, well, the first thing that comes into my mind is a TV show, and that TV show is called TFI Fridays. And TFI Friday, actually the acronym TFI, I will let your viewers try to understand what that means.
Thank F, it's Friday.
So on a Friday night, there used to be this show on Channel 4, which started at 6 o'clock, ended at 7, and it had lots of sort of like musicians on this show, comedians. It was really fun. The presenter was a guy called Chris Evans who had ginger hair and glasses. And he was really, really cool. And it was very upbeat. It was a very sort of like celebratory mood every Friday, you know, like a good feeling to get on a Friday, and you felt very excited, and it was all very cool. And then after that, we would all go out and have fun. But there were many shows like that in the 90s. I think above all, and I don't think this is just based upon my age only, I do believe that the 90s was a happy time in England, largely a happy time.
Yeah, and one thing that we didn't have at the start of the 90s, maybe we did kind of towards the end, the internet and smartphones and things like this, right? And I remember these days, and I remember making plans with school friends and how difficult it was. Of course, nowadays we just can't imagine doing this. We can't imagine doing anything without the internet, without smartphones. So how did you, Aidan, how did you manage to plan events with your friends? How did you manage to like, all right, we're going to go to the cinema on this day? How did it work?
Okay, can I just show you something?
Mm-hmm.
One moment. Do you see this?
Wow.
Yeah, well, this is a telephone, and this telephone, not this specific telephone, but these telephones were usually inside houses in the 1990s. They were designed probably in the 1960s, and this is how you would communicate with your friends. Okay, this came just before the telephones where you could press buttons. So how would we organize events? Well, I would literally give my phone number to a friend at school. I'd write it down on a piece of paper, 712972. I even remember the number. And then you put that in your pocket, and you wouldn't lose it, because if you lost it, you wouldn't be able to contact your friend. It would be almost impossible unless you had somebody else's number, la la. Anyway, I would communicate with my friends with this device, and I would literally sit in a room away from my parents, so they couldn't understand what I was talking about or hear. I think sometimes maybe my mum tried to listen. You know, I think that's probably something that she actually really did do. Anyway, so yeah, this is how we would communicate. And if you had a friend who had, for example, a 9 in their number, you have to go 9, or go all the way around to 9, and then it would go back. And if they had 3 or 4 9s, it wasn't very nice to communicate with that person, because it just took too long to dial the number. So yeah, that's what we used to use. And we used to also, you know, send each other letters and stuff like that. Especially, for example, yeah, if you had a love interest, for example, you would write down a note on a piece of paper at school and pass it to your friend, and then it would go around the classroom. And eventually your love interest would open the piece of paper, either feel sick or be very happy.
What if you were late?
What if you were late for what?
Meeting your friend? Did you have to, because you couldn't call them because they were outside of the home, right? So they would just have to wait for you?
Yeah. And you used to, well, you would have to be very committed, because everybody would understand that, okay, maybe that's why the British are known for being punctual, because if you organise to meet your friend Phil outside McDonald's in Chatham High Street at 12 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, that was like a deal. If you're standing in Chatham High Street outside McDonald's and it's now 20 past 12, no sign of the guy, you start to get a bit angry. Then you give maybe yourself like 10 more minutes. And if they didn't arrive, there was a strong possibility that friendship was now broken.
We used to, I remember I had friends that lived in different towns in Wales, but we all went to the same school. And so we used to say, like, right, we're going to get on this train, which starts at Rumney and ends in Cardiff. And on a Friday, we would say, right, this is the time of the train. We're going to sit in the last car on the train. And it worked. People got on at different stops, but we met our friends on that train, which seems unbelievable now, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's commitment for you. That's nice. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
you mentioned this TFI Friday with Chris Evans. I remember that show as well. Do you remember any other iconic TV programs or TV shows from the 90s?
Yeah, definitely. Also, there was a very cool show on BBC Two that was on maybe every Saturday or Friday night. Can't remember exactly, but it was called Later with Jules Holland. And again, it was like, different acts. Like, for example, Radiohead might play, Pulp might play, Blur, Massive Attack, any sort of like 90s, any sort of like band that was of relevance in the 1990s would play on that show. So like Blur would play a song, someone else would play a song, and it was a really cool thing to watch because we didn't have the internet. So the only way that you could really see these bands would be either to go to their shows, look in magazines at their pictures, or look at Jaws Holland, where you might get to see them play one tune in like, see that one live piece of music in 6 months. Other ways of watching it would be through MTV and all that sort of stuff. We had that too, right? Because that was the beginning of Sky Television and, access to platforms like MTV. And I think there was like VH1, right? What was that? There was a different
VH1.
musical. Yeah, VH1. So that was that. That's enough for the music side, but also we had shows like Australian TV shows that I would watch after school every day. One was called
Neighbours, Home and Away.
Yes. Do you know the theme song, Glenn? Do you remember the song?
Neighbours, everybody needs good neighbours, of course.
That's Neighbours,
And they
man.
showed
But
it twice, didn't they? They showed it once at like 1 p.m. lunchtime, and then they showed the same episode like at 5:30.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, and I wonder why that was.
Well, because people who didn't work could watch it as part of their daytime, and people who work could watch it afterwards. But yeah, strange. What about the American shows? Like I watched like Sunday morning. I remember shows like Saved by the Bell and stuff like this. I also watched some teen dramas like Dawson's Creek. Did you ever get into any of those 90s American shows?
Yeah, I got into one called The Wonder Years. It was actually, it was a show that was actually set in maybe like the 1960s or 1970s. It was an American show, and that was really cool. It was quite, melancholic, I'd say, and it was very like dreamy. Some jokes in there. There was a particular actress that played the part of the boys' sort of like love interest, and I remember her name. Wasn't it Winnie something? What was her name? Do you remember?
I never watched this. I don't know.
Okay, all right. So there was the Wonder Years. Yeah, Saved by the Bell. That was a cool thing to watch. Any other things? I can't really remember off the top of my head. But no, lots of different things you could watch in the 90s for sure.
Yeah, I remember there was something iconic about those like American high schools. I thought like they look so cool compared to our schools. But the one thing I always think about, like the perception of time, right? Like 6 weeks is not a long time when you're 42 or 44 or 45 years old. But when you're a kid in the 90s and you have these summer holidays, those 6 weeks seem to last forever. And I don't know if it was the same for you, but like we'd be out pretty much all day. And of course, we didn't have phones. And so your parents would just hope that you'd come home at lunchtime, or they'd hope that you'd come home in the night. They'd have no way of finding out. But we used to get up to all kinds of crazy stuff. I'm wondering if that was the same experience for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the beginning of the 90s, I was like 11 years old. 11 in 1990, I was like 11, and then 95, obviously 16. So it was kind of a bit two things happened, right? I was like with my parents and would go on like day trips when I was younger, when I was around about 11 or 12, day trips in a red Y-Reg Cavalier that my stepdad used to like make it very red and shiny all the time. It was his pride and joy, which was ridiculous because, to be fair with you, that car was very average, but he liked it very much, and we'd go to different places in Kent, Howlett Zoo, Folkestone, which is basically a seaside, and there would be a big market there, and there would be like different games that you could play, which I really liked. It was really fun, but I was very restricted, and I would not be able to do the things that I could do a little bit later in the 90s. When I turned 16, I was allowed to go out a lot more on my own with my friends. And yeah, this is when, like, you know, I'd say to my mum, I'm going to be back at 10, but usually I would not be back at 10. I'd come home at midnight, and we would just be going to random places. Sometimes we would have a map and we would like throw a penny to see where the penny would land on the map. And then we go, right, okay, we're going to go to Twiddle. We're going to Twiddle today. And it didn't matter where we're going. Just go to Twiddle, like, and see what happens when you go to Twiddle. But we would go there. We would definitely have some interesting drinks together. We would often take a guitar with us because we were all very into music and bands, and there would always be a person who could play, and usually 4 or 5 people who could sing. So sometimes you'd have to wait your turn to sing. So yeah, that was really cool, and I really enjoyed that time. But also, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, because when you went out as a teenager in the 1990s, especially in a place where I grew up, there was a very high possibility that you were going to either see or experience violence in the streets, because there would always be groups of boys, usually bored, maybe drunk, who want some excitement, and they would get their excitement through the art of fighting together.
And the world has moved on a little bit, but how much of this do you want to pass down to your own children? I know they're not ready to kind of go out on the street, but do you want them to have that authentic experience where they're like out, not with like a criminal gang, but like with a gang of friends who just do this like adventure exploring stuff, and they come home when they come home without all of this like texting and stuff?
Oh, well, I do hope that my children experience that to a certain degree. Absolutely. I think I can let them do that with confidence now that we actually have all these smartphones and Apple Watches, because I can communicate with my kid and make sure that they're safe. But in terms of sitting down all day playing Roblox versus actually going out and going on a train and going to see something different, I would vote for this option and not the smartphone. I hope that they get into that. And of course, I think that kids will always be kids at the end of the day. And I do believe that fights happen. And to be honest with you, I'm in the UK right now, and I walk around and I see how it is. And I don't think really that the UK has moved on from that time. I still believe that that time is here. And if not, I think maybe it's got even worse. Because where I'm from, in Kent, there is a particular place called Rochester High Street. And Rochester High Street is a very beautiful place. It's very historic. It's where Charles Dickens wrote most of his books. You know, Oliver Twist, Great Expectations, A Tale of Two Cities. It's of historic value. Absolutely beautiful place. However, 5 o'clock on a Friday, that place goes into lockdown. It's like there are bars everywhere. People go there. So the police close the roads. So it makes it difficult for people to go in and to go out. So people are getting checked. Identification. We need to see your identification, please, in order to go into the high streets, because there are often fights and crimes that take place. So I think that that's the time that existed in the 90s. In terms of street violence, I believe that it's still there, and if not, it's got worse.
Yeah, it's a pity. I think that the decline of Britain might be a subject for another podcast episode. Another thing I remember very fondly from the 90s is in Britain we had this thing called Britpop. First of all, can you explain what Britpop is and who were some iconic bands in Britpop and what were some of your favorite ones?
Oh wow, Britpop. Britpop was a wonderful thing. So Britpop involved a certain amount of bands. Those bands were Oasis, Blur, Pulp, Supergrass, Manic Street Preachers, Stereophonics. Who else? There are lots and lots of other bands. But it was a time of extreme richness in musical output in the UK, and it wasn't just music, but it was a style. It was a trend, and it's something that a lot of kids would follow, and you would create your own identity based upon this musical genre. So you would dress up like, I don't know, a guy from Oasis, Liam or Noel Gallagher. You'd grow your hair long and you have it long around the sides, and you'd have your sunglasses, and that's how you would dress. And then maybe you would have a friend in your friendship circle who's dressed like the lead singer of Blur, Damon Albarn, who had his hair in a different kind of way and he wore different kind of indie clothes, which were maybe a little bit more, I don't know, not as working class as the way Oasis would present themselves. So those two bands had a big rivalry, and that had different consequences on people, because people would ask you a question: who do you prefer, Oasis or Blur? And that question got really annoying after a while. Like today, who do you prefer, like Messi or Ronaldo? It's the same thing. And I mean, during those times, I liked both. I liked all of them, to be honest with you. So I got quite frustrated with that question. But also, Britpop was great because we'd go to so many different gigs, so many different festivals, have so many good times together watching those bands. And even today, when you listen to the music, it's still good. It's still great. And I'd advise any of your listeners to definitely listen to it.
Yeah, sometimes I think of when I think of music, I think, okay, if you ask me to name iconic bands from the 60s, I can do that. The 70s, the 80s, the 90s, definitely I can do that. When I think about music today, I don't know, and maybe it's because I'm old, but I don't know if who do we have that's truly iconic, that's, active in their prime now? Radiohead are past their prime, they're still making good music, but they're not a 2020s band. Imagine Dragons, The Weeknd. I know this isn't about music, but do you think objectively music in the 90s was better than the music we have today?
Yeah, I think that the music in the 90s was way more what we'd use the adjective raw, because it was raw and it's something that you could identify with. I believe that the music of today is still, basically songs of nursery rhymes. So it's like, who's made the better nursery rhyme? Or is this just the same nursery rhyme presented in a different way with different sound effects? And I just think that the nursery rhymes are just getting boring, and it's very difficult for artists to sell something that is of any sort of musical relevance today, because what's new? What can we create that's new? Maybe Taylor Swift, but I don't know even one Taylor Swift song. I just don't, because I've just completely ignored it, Mm-hmm. I'm sure your followers will be able to advise you, Glenn. But I'm not too sure myself. Yeah, The Weeknd. There's another guy called Central C. Apparently he's quite good, but I listen to him and it's like, okay. Fine.
I feel like we're quite old now. And one thing that was fresh and new, and I never quite got into it. I wasn't part of that clique really in school. This thing of dance music or house music or trance music or something, like heavy beat, heavy electronic music, Darude Sandstorm, things like this. And connected to that music was also this rave culture. Did you ever get into this stuff? And what was the appeal of this rave culture and dance music?
Well, rave culture was there. It was definitely there. I can tell you a little bit about it. My friend, I had different friends at school, but when this particular family, they were a very religious family. Well, at least dad was, but the boys were not. The boys were absolute tearaways. And there was one boy, and his name was, I won't say his name. He had an attic, and in his attic, he would get these special posters. And these special posters were called flyers, and they would be basically advertising illegal raves. Where is the next illegal rave? And it would have titles like Equinox or Back to Back, and they were really beautiful to look at. Very bright colors, sometimes with like a mystical looking woman on it, or maybe some headphones. It was all like really funky and really cool and a little bit dangerous, right?
Just so we're clear, just so everyone's clear, rave is like a big outside party with music and dancing, right?
Yeah. And a lot of the time in the 90s, the parties were illegal because they took place inside factories that were not used anymore, for example, or a train station that's not used anymore. So the atmosphere was quite, it was already a little bit dark and dangerous and on the outside of culture. So my friend who had this bedroom, all of these flyers were absolutely everywhere on his bedroom wall, and you could not see the actual wall because it was covered with all of these different flyers. Anyway, we also knew that he had some decks. He had some decks in his room, so he played this very loud drum and bass music, which I could not stand, to be fair with you. I hated it. I didn't like it at all. But when you're around something for a long time, you start liking it a little bit. So we got into a small band who are now a very, very popular and worldwide known act called The Prodigy. I was 15 years old, and this boy, he invited me to go to an under 18 nightclub to watch this group called The Prodigy. And I was very scared, very nervous, because the people who would go to these like raves, they were not so how can we put it? They did things that the police would not like. So I went there and feeling a little bit scared. Anyway, I was at the front of in the crowd near the stage. Okay, so I was at the front. Prodigy come on, all this scary music, and I remember this one particular man was crawling around the stage, like crawling around, like near the faces of 15-year-olds and poking his tongue out. It's like, and I was petrified. And it turned out, I didn't know who he was at the time, but it was Keith Flint from The Prodigy, who's now died. He recently died, rest in peace. So that was all quite scary and dark, to be honest with you. But those raves continue today. They continue today here and there. But I guess those people are now 45, 50 that attend them. Or maybe not, who knows?
I even remember some of the Prodigy's iconic music videos, and they were kind of terrifying when you were younger.
Yeah, truly. Yeah. I will say one more thing. There again, when we talk about identity through the things that you wear and all that sort of stuff, indie people would wear tracksuit tops and have their hair in a particular way. They would wear beads around here. They'd usually have something on their wrists. Now, if you were into drum and bass and rave music, when you go to school, you would have, everyone had to wear a bag at school, right? But if you were into drum and bass and rave music, you would have a record bag. So you would go to a particular place to buy the record bag, and then you'd put your books inside your record bag. But when you're at school, you got a record bag that says Fantasia 1996 on the side, and then you would get probably a little bit of respect from people, or people might think, we shouldn't mess with him anymore.
On the flip side of that, like in my school, the mostly girls, but not exclusively, were into these things called boy bands. Of course, we did have some boy bands, I guess, in the 80s, but in Britain we had like things like Boyzone and Take That and Westlife. Why did this become a thing in the 90s? And did you have any favorite boy bands?
I'm gonna tell you that. Yeah, I mean, like boy bands. I don't boy bands started with the Beatles, didn't they? Really, to be fair with you, in the 1960s, you know that
Yeah,
boy.
but it was
That
okay
boy.
to like the Beatles, I think. In the 90s, it was a big shame, in my school at least, if you were a guy and you liked a boy band. That was like, that meant that you were effeminate or weak or something like this.
Actually, you know, probably the same in my school. You wouldn't openly admit that you like it. You know, you wouldn't openly admit it. I don't think. But then again, there was a like Oasis and Blur, with the rivalry. There was a boy band called Take That, and another boy band called E17. Take That being the good boys, E17 being the badder boys. I did like E17. I must say that I did.
It
did
was
like
okay
them,
to like E17. Like Brian Harvey was considered like cool.
yeah, and also he's somebody that you might see at a rave. You know. That style, you know, that style of man. But yeah, boy bands were definitely a thing. And actually, I had a friend called I won't mention his name, but we decided to create our own boy band once. And because his first name begins with D and my name begins with A, our unofficial boy band were called DNA, and we had our own dance that we would use when we went to our under 18s nightclub. That collaboration lasted for 1 month, and it didn't go any further.
The DNA. Well, it's 2025. Everyone's making a comeback, so who knows? You mentioned this thing with identity, and definitely music was like a huge identifier, right? You had like the popular kids in my school, the sporty guys, usually like that house music. Some of them, you know, a bit more alternative, perhaps, were into bands like Oasis and The Verve and stuff like that. Pop music, like the boy band stuff. But also we had like these moshers or something like this that were into largely American rock music, like grunge music, Nirvana, the Smashing Pumpkins, Green Day, even like Rage Against the Machine, Blink-182. Was our music better than theirs? And did you have a similar thing in school where you had like the guys with the hoodies and the baggy jeans and stuff like this?
Yeah, absolutely. We had that. Definitely. And we actually called them grungers. For some reason, they were all grungers, because I guess that Nirvana from the United States, that genre was grunge music, right? Along with Pearl Jam and who else? The Pixies, I guess. But yeah, no, that existed in my school. And the people who liked those bands were usually people who didn't look like they washed so much. Their clothes were often dirty. They would usually roll their own cigarettes, and sometimes the tobacco would not be fresh, and even sometimes they would pick up cigarettes from the floor and use that tobacco in order to create the cigarette and then still smoke it with their grunge friends. Yeah, they were around, and they were also quite, in a way, a little bit connected with the indie group, but they thought that they were the real ambassadors of 90s culture, and they believed that indie people who liked Oasis and Blur and Sleeper, etc., were more, as you said, like feminine. There was a hierarchy: boy bands, indie, grungers, rave, but maybe those two would flip sometimes, who knows. But I will build on that, because we used to go to a nightclub called Subsonics, and in Subsonics there would be the indie room, and then there would be the grunge room. Okay, so in the grunge room, that's where all the people with the long hair, they're all bashing their heads, they're pushing each other. It's fun, but it's violent. And when I was usually in the indie room, you know, dancing around like a little fairy boy. And then around about 10 o'clock, after we've had a few special drinks, we would decide to go down to the grunge room and do some moshing. And that was something that we used to do. So really, we liked their music, as indie people, we'd like their music, but we just wouldn't tell them that.
Amazing. Happy days. I want to ask you a series. We're going to move on to this quickfire round. So I'm going to ask you just a bunch of questions. You can give short answers, 1 or 2 words, fine. If you want to develop and elaborate on some of them, feel free to do so. Firstly, something, either item of clothing or an accessory that people wore in the 90s.
Beads.
An iconic haircut from the 90s.
Liam Gallagher haircut.
I thought you were going to say curtains.
Oh, I could have gone there, but that's the first thing that came into my head.
I took part in this trend for a while. If people don't know, curtains is like the David Beckham haircut where you have a parting in the middle of your hair and it goes off to both sides like this and it's longer. Did you ever take part in this?
Of course. I had curtains.
Yeah, same. A popular shop in the 90s that's no longer around. I was thinking the same. Woolworths was a weird shop, wasn't it? Can you explain to people who might not know what Woolworths was?
God. Well, Woolworths was... I loved Woolworths. It was a great shop. It had so many different things inside. You'd go into the front of the shop and there'd be loads of sweeties, loads of candy, and you could, take some sweets and put it into a bag, take those sweets, put it into the same bag. It was really good. Lots of colorful things. And then maybe if you look over to your left-hand side, that's where all of the music would be. So you'd have all of the music, current music of that time, and that's where you could go and buy maybe a tape, maybe a CD, because back then we didn't have iTunes, so we'd literally have to take the physical thing, take it home, put it inside the tape recorder or CD player in order to listen to it. So there was that. And then you had different things where you could buy clothes for kids and for adults. Lots of different like home appliances. It was basically everything under one roof, to be fair with you.
Maybe that's why they failed. Yeah, I have the same. I remember the Sweets as you go in. Definitely, it was a place where I bought music. But I think they also had other like electronic stuff and other like pens and pencils, stationery. It was kind of a weird shop, like a mix of everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
An iconic 90s British news presenter.
John Suchet?
Channel 4?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking Moira Stewart. You remember Moira Stewart?
I remember Moira Stewart, yeah.
I don't know why, but they were like Trevor McDonald was also quite popular, right?
Yeah, I guess so. But I mean, to be honest with you, I didn't really watch the news so much in the 90s. Maybe that's why I was happy, because I didn't watch the news in the 90s. Maybe now I have too much exposure to information. News. Oh no, the world's on fire. But yeah, in the 90s, I mean, the news for me was boring, so I wouldn't watch it.
Yeah, my grandparents always insisted on it. Off to something a bit more fun. A computer game from the 90s.
Amstrad.
That was a console, right? Or was it a game?
Yeah, it was a console. It was an Amstrad. And then there was like I think also a Commodore 64. There was something called an Atari ST. But an actual
Spectrum.
Spectrum. Oh, that's more like 70s, isn't it? Oh, no, that's more like 80s going into the 90s.
Maybe, yeah, late 80s. And then we got a Sega Master System.
Yeah. Cool.
Mega Drive.
Sega Master System was awesome. But then the actual physical proper computer, wasn't there one called like a Nimbus or something like that?
I thought that's from Harry Potter, isn't it, Nimbus?
No, I think that J.K. Rowling took it from Harry Potter, and that's why it has sort of like cultural value for us. We're like, oh, right, yeah, Nimbus 2000. The reason why we know that is because we used to have those computers.
a mobile phone from the 90s, or maybe the first mobile phone you had?
Mobile phone from the 90s. Jesus Christ. Oh yeah, geez. Yeah, actually. So I mentioned briefly before, at the beginning of this conversation, that I left school when I was like 16 and I got a job in London. And I used to think I was great because I used to have, I would have to wear a suit to go to London. So I thought I was a millionaire, but I wasn't. I was getting paid literally nothing. But I had enough money to go out on the weekend. However, there was a shop, a mobile phone shop, that I would pass in the city of London every day. I'd pass the shop, and it was called 1-to-1. And I was like, oh, I want a phone. I've got some money to get a phone. And I got a phone, bought this phone, and I thought it was very sleek, very small, that you could just pop in your top pockets and look really good. And I did that, but it was literally like putting this inside my pocket and walking around with it, you know? And it was like the jacket would be weighed down, but I wouldn't care. It was fine for me. But yeah, that was a Nokia something or other. I can't remember.
Do you ever have any of those? I think my first one was a Motorola with an extendable aerial, so I had to pull this aerial out if I wanted to make a call.
Yeah, with an aerial, you could literally communicate with other planets. They were the symbol of the future. Yeah, I didn't have that, Glyn. You're obviously way more advanced and cooler than me at that point.
It's those Welsh valleys you needed, those aerials. And a popular cartoon from the 90s.
Oh, a cartoon from the 90s. There were loads, right? Gee whiz. I used to watch one called Dennis. And Dennis was on Sky One. Do you remember Dennis, the kid with the blonde hair? He had a neighbor called Mr. Mitchell. And he was always like getting very angry with him. There was that, of course. I used to like to watch that. But I also really liked The Simpsons, because The Simpsons started in the 90s, the famous American show.
Did you ever watch this Cartoon Network stuff again, this American, like Johnny Bravo, that type of stuff? Maybe you were a bit older. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't watch that.
A couple of things that I think we'll both be interested in. An iconic football kit from the 90s. I know you're an Arsenal fan, and I'm thinking of that yellow Arsenal one with the little triangles on there.
Yeah, the bruised banana. That's called the bruised banana kit, and I would say that's the most iconic for me. It's funny that you said that. My stepfather used to call that the disease. Why don't you put your disease top on? I was like, all right, okay, I will. Disease is on. That one. But then there was also another one, a Manchester United kit, actually, and it had laces at the front, and that looked kind of cool. So Manchester United did that, and then other football clubs would do the same thing. So Ipswich Town also had this. In the 90s, I used to collect football tops. So I support Arsenal, but I loved all the football tops, and they're great now. I love football tops. But there was one that Ipswich released with the laces at the front, and here going in diagonally was the word Fisons. And Fisons, do you know what Fisons is, Glenn?
No idea.
It's a fertilizer. So in the Ipswich are a football club
Tractor Boys.
based. Yeah, they're called the Tractor Boys because that area of England is largely farmland, agricultural land. So Fisons is a company that basically makes manure. And manure is, well, I won't say it, but it's what we use in order for the plants to grow. So yeah, I was basically going around with this on my top, which could translate to the word poo.
I'm surprised you didn't pick the Newcastle one with the horizontal stripes, the purple and blue. That was an iconic one for me. Newcastle Brown Ale on the front.
Yeah, that was cool. That reminded me of David Ginola when you said that.
Well, that brings us on to the next question. An iconic footballer from the 90s. Probably there are quite a few.
God, there's so many, right? So like David Ginola, that he would be my number one. I love that guy, even though he played for Tottenham. He was so good. Faustino Asprilla, who played for Newcastle. Amazing guy. What a football player. Eric Cantona, Manchester United. Ian Wright of Arsenal. Chris Kawamia of Ipswich Town. Who else was there? John Fashanu. He was at the early 90s. David Beckham. I mean, there are so many, right? We could be here all day.
What was the Nottingham Forest player with the pineapple on his head?
I don't know. I want to say like Jason something.
Yeah, it was Jason something, wasn't it?
I can't remember. Yeah, Jason
Maybe
Lee.
he's disappeared from fame, and maybe he'll come on as one of the podcast guests in the future. And as an as an Arsenal fan, I'll have to ask you an iconic sporting moment. Doesn't have to be Arsenal. Any iconic sporting moment. You had Euro '96 in England as well.
Any iconic sporting moment from the 1990s? I mean, yeah, it'd probably be when Paul Gascoigne scored the second goal for England against Scotland at Wembley Stadium. And it was a wonderful goal. Wonderful goal.
Hit it over Colin Hendry, as I remember.
Yeah. That's right. The ex-Blackburn Rovers defender. Yeah, and then like Gascoigne scored, and he was on the pitch laying down, and some of the other football players squirted water into his mouth, like yeah, good. That was a really really cool time. But then there was also other things that happened in the 90s, like different sports, right? I think like didn't England win the Rugby World Cup?
I think that was 2001.
Oh, okay.
Johnny Wilkinson dropped goal. Right?
Yeah. I'll have to check that out. But yeah, there are lots of different sporting moments, but to be honest with you, I can't remember off the top of my head. They're all associated. They're usually associated with football. Of course, Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson in the 1990s was a really big thing, and boxing in general, because in the 90s, even now, if you wanted to watch a boxing match, you would usually invite your friends over. You'd have to ask your mum's permission first. They would come over. You'd have a sleep over, which means that your friends will come and you would go to bed, and then you would wake up early to watch the boxing. No. It didn't happen like that. So I remember watching Mike Tyson fight a very famous British boxer back then called Frank Bruno. And Frank Bruno, I mean, Mike Tyson was a very, very dangerous fighter back then. And Frank Bruno represented the possibility of Great Britain having their own heavyweight champion of the world. He was our only hope. And everybody was really hoping that this would happen, but in fact, he got absolutely destroyed. I remember staying up all night. Huh? Twice.
I think he got destroyed twice by Tyson. Yeah,
he did. Yeah. But yeah, did you remember doing that sort of thing, Glenn? Did you stay awake to watch boxing matches in the 1990s?
Yeah, with Prince Nazim Hamed. I remember he had that fight against Barrera, his last fight. I remember, early on in his career, his fights were on like normal TV. And then of course Sky Sports came in and dominated stuff. But yeah, we had quite a few evenings like that. We also stayed up for other American sports like wrestling stuff, but the same, every intention to go to sleep early and then wake up, but then you stay up, and then it's going to start at 4 a.m. and you fall asleep.
Yeah. But now we're a bit older, you can just go to sleep and set your alarm and then wake up. But like back then, if your friends are with you and you're 16 years old, it's just the most wonderful thing, because you're getting to spend time with each other and just have fun and talk. And interestingly enough, we'd do that all night long without a smartphone or without a computer. It would just be pure jokes. and maybe fights. Maybe some fights will happen, some teasing, a little bit of bullying. Who knows? We always had material to entertain ourselves, strangely enough.
Good old-fashioned, wholesome bullying.
Well, not bullying. Let's call it teasing.
Teasing, yeah. Well, thanks for taking me down this trip down memory lane. I do think the 90s, probably because I'm old, I do think the 90s was the best decade, and unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever get anything like that. I'm happy that I'm part of that generation that gets to experience life before the internet and life after the internet. I think that's a really cool position to be in, being in our generation.
Yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely. And I wanted to say thank you for allowing me to go down this trip down memory lane, in a way where somebody isn't going to say to me, "Oh, for God's sake, why are you talking about that again?"
Well, we'll see. Maybe some people in the comments who know you will find you and put all caps or something. But yeah, thanks a lot, Aidan. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you, man, and all the best.
Nice one, Glenn. Take care, buddy.